be a good refresher from what you talked about last month.
And I think, well, I appreciate that. And the results aside, at least putting that, the quick summary of the results is that, as some of you may know, Senator Burr is now the ranking member of the Senate Committee on Health, and so he'll be a very important player in North Carolina in particular. And I see Amy Hendricks is on here right now from North Carolina, and there are several other folks that are probably here, but North Carolina has got some institutions that play a role in there. So what we did was we did a little bit of research on how North Carolina played. Natalie, Natalie V, because I'll always mispronounce Natalie's name, was our constituent that was there. And we orchestrated it to make sure it happened in a half an hour to get our message out, give the Andy Voigt an opportunity to ask questions. He was the staffer. And to get a pseudo commitment from him that at least he's going to try to get Senator Burr to be one of the co-sponsors of this. And that would be important to get the minority side, if you will, to play into this, because it'll help us with getting other Republicans on the bill and committed to the bill. But I think some of the things that you'll go through today in the discussion that Catherine's going to provide about advocacy at its very fundamental level and what you can and can't do and some of the things you can do was a direct application of the things that Natalie's going to bring up into how we approached it last week. And I think we were very successful, and we've got some follow-up that's going on there. So with that, back to you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. And then I'm not sure where we are, but California advocates, they've got North and South, and we're getting a meeting set to meet with them, because there's a lot of key representatives on the committees from California. So we want to make sure that whole piece is coordinated. And they've already put together a fabulous document, and you can get it online, talking about costs and FASD in California, which they were going to use as background material for a statewide task force. But that document will be really helpful for when to send to the different health LAs in California. And hot off the press, my Representative Angie Craig, Democrat from Minnesota, who's a new member of the House Health Subcommittee, I had sent a note to her a couple days ago, and we just got a meeting scheduled either Friday or Monday with her. I sent to Sarah of Proof Alliance, because we're going to do something comparable to what we did with Senator Burr's, but we have a lot of good advocates in Minnesota, and particularly in her district, which is the 2nd congressional district, which is the one that Arnie and I currently reside in. And then the great news is we're going to have a meeting Friday with the health LAs of our authors on the bill, and you'll recognize them because they're all from the last session. And so this is what we've been waiting to do. There's been as you know, there's been a lot going on the Hill, so they've been very busy. And so we've got our Republican Democratic authors in both the House and Senate, and all we need to do is and you can move the slide. I think Tom you can see that. So what we need to do is this meeting will go over the language of the revised bill, because there are, as I talked about last time, there are some changes. And so the goal is hopefully to go through that language and then have that submitted to Legislative Council for introduction. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, hopefully by next webinar we'll have a bill number in both the House and the Senate. But we've been doing other stuff, and thanks to Kate and Nate Bergerbest, I don't know if you've been paying attention on the Hill, but they've been doing nominations, Senate confirmation hearings for the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Xavier Becerra, and Kate suggested this, and as a team, we put together this question, this introduction and question that Senator Murkowski, we asked her if she could submit that at the hearing, nomination hearing, and they accepted it. I don't know whether it was actually asked, but it also could be in the record. So, and you'll be able to see this on the website, but I think this is really important because this gets this issue top front and center before the HHS nominee in a way that it was an opportunity. And thanks to Kate for suggesting it, and Nate for giving us the logistics on how we got it to the senator in time to get it submitted. So that was the question for Senator Murkowski. And then we had another question for, let's see, did you have that one, Tom, or not, or just this one? The one for, we had another question for the nominee for Surgeon General.
Yes, and I have that up on the screen now.
Oh, now there it is. Okay, so this was another, and Anna from Senator Murkowski's loved both of our questions. And as you can, I know it's hard to read it quickly, but the Surgeon General has not issued a warning on prenatal alcohol consumption by women since 2005. And with the pandemic, and we know with the new the increase in binge drinking and statistics on that during the pandemic, and the 2018 study on prevalence, it just seemed like it was an appropriate time. And this gets, again, we don't know if because they have so many questions, and whether Senator Murkowski was able to get that actually asked, but it will hopefully go into the record. So we were excited about that. Just wanted to let you know. And let's see, then I think that's it.
Can I add?
Go ahead, Kate. You want to, fill in?
Yes, I just wanted to explain the importance of a question. It seems silly, minor, but when questions from senators in a confirmation hearing, when the questions are posed and they can be submitted for the record, it signals both to the committee staff that senators are concerned about an issue or interested in it and want to do something about it. And then of course it signals the same interest to the agency, in this case, HHS. And then of course the agency has to staff it out and get the questions answered. So it's a good way to flag an issue for the key decision makers. And so that's what we wanted to do, both in the case of the Secretary of HHS and in the case of the Surgeon General. And the Surgeon General, of course, in previous years has actually made statements about the risk of prenatal exposure to alcohol, but it hasn't done so in quite a while. So this is just a way of flagging the issue and putting it on the radar screen.
Yep, I think it was great. Okay, that's and you can be able to ask questions after at the end of the presentation. And Catherine, I believe, is Catherine next?
Kate, did you want to add anything more? Are you good?
Well, I would just say that in the legislative arena, you're always looking for opportunities to advance the ball. So Susan has done a fantastic job in updating, and authoring the FASD reauthorization bill last Congress and making improvements this Congress. So that's a major push for NOFAS. But what it is an authorization. It's permission to do something. So and to tell the agencies how the federal programs on FASD should be altered and expanded and strengthened. But in order to get money into those programs, it's just the authorization bill is permission to spend money in a particular area. The appropriation bill is actually making the money available to be spent. So there's always a two-track effort, and NOFAS will be exploring opportunities in the funding area for HHS and the various HHS agencies. And we're looking at the possibility of exploring something in the defense area as well, but that's very nascent. So we will discuss that in more detail probably in the next seminar. Thank you.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Shea, and I'm delighted to be the newbie on the policy team and working with this amazing group of people that just are movers and shakers. Some of them I've known for a number of years and delighted to be back working with again. So as the newbie in the group, I was asked to sort of talk about my story and why I am so passionate about FASD and sort of how I got here. So this will be 31 years of life in a nutshell. And my passion really, as you know, I certainly have the role of parent, I still do that, and have become an expert in FASD, if there ever is an expert, to advocate. And of all of those roles, being an advocate is one of the ones I am most passionate about, because if we don't advocate, we will never have the services and the supports for our kiddos and our families that they need to advance their lives and to make this world a better place. So I want to build an army of advocates across this country and around the world, and to make sure that advocates have the skill set that they need to be strong advocates, but also the self-confidence. And I think it takes time to build that confidence, because you can easily be intimidated by meeting with legislators, governors. I've been in those seats, and sometimes the words don't even come out of my mouth in the way that I want them to. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. And so I'm just going to share my personal story. So I believe that it's very important, and I've been in a lot of legislative meetings at the local level, the state level, both here and in New York. And I have gained a lot of experience in sitting with some of those legislators. And probably the hardest thing for me is to keep my mouth shut, especially if I disagree with them. But I've kind of mastered that, and I've sort of mastered having the poker face, which I've never had. So you keep learning as you keep doing. So for me, the parent part is leading with the heart. And my personal story is that we got our little guy 31 years ago when we were living in Albany. And that it was at the time of the crack cocaine crises. And there were about 200 babies born a day in New York City that were crack positive. And that was an automatic removal at that point in time. And so I was working for a Catholic nonprofit agency in Albany that was, the CEO was a charities nun, and she said every employee will become a foster parent. And we were like, no, we don't think so. But we became a foster parent. We became foster parents. And about 3 weeks later, after we were certified, we got a call that there was a little guy in Harlem Hospital, and he was ready for a home. And he was 4.5 months old. And I said, well, why has he been in the NICU for 4.5 months? And they said, well, he's got some growth problems. He has fetal alcohol syndrome. He has a cleft palate. But with a loving home, he'll overcome all of these things and life will be great. Well, I'm a clinical social worker, and I was specializing in pediatric social work at the time. And I had never heard, this was 1989, I had never heard the words fetal alcohol syndrome in all of my coursework ever. And I had absolutely no idea what we were facing. But we got him at 4.5 months. He was incredibly developmentally delayed, but he was the cutest little thing you ever saw. And so it did not take long at all to fall in love with him. It took 4 years to get him adopted because the New York social service system at that time was a complete and total disaster, and we would go to court and go to court and go to court. So to make a long story short, we're 31 years later on the journey. He lives with us still. He is the love of our lives. He brings us immense joy. He has done some presentations with me, and he brings the house down. But, you know, people say to me, how have you done this? I mean, this hasn't always been easy, and it isn't. But and I've also been told by legislators that one of the most powerful things I ever say is my experience as a parent. And that's what they want to hear. And that's what grabs them. And that's what they pay attention to. So much more so than I think data sometimes, although all of it's important. But you as a family member, or as a parent, you have your lived experience. And it is only yours. No one else has lived your life. My husband and I probably have different personal stories. But nobody can tell it like you can. So I encourage advocates to write out their story, to make it as concise and articulate as possible. And it's great to use emotional words like heartbreak and fear. And we all, as parents, have a lot of fear. I went through a period of having a lot of fear with his birth mom, pain and hopelessness, and helplessness. But also hopeful, that it's important to maintain hope for yourself, to maintain hope for your children, and to make sure that legislators understand this is not a hopeless cause. We have sufficient research to date to really, we know that if we can get them diagnosed early, all of Dr. Strydzku's universal protective factors, if those are in place, you can make a difference in these people's lives. And the prediction that we were given when Seth was 7 was that his brain damage was so severe that this was by a pediatric neurologist, that she recommended we not follow through with the adoption, that he would most likely be institutionalized by the age of 7. And that was just too heartbreaking to take. And I'm Irish and stubborn and said, that's not going to happen. And so we took a different route and just tried a lot of different things. And he's amazing. I mean, his brain is still growing every single day. He's reading. He's been on stage as a joke teller, and well, I could just go on, but he's come a long, long way. So, okay, Tom, you can change this slide. So one of the things I just really wanted to hit on this short period of time is that when you are meeting with a legislator, it is really important to keep your story brief. I think my first story I wrote out on paper was 15 pages long. No legislator is going to read 15 pages of your personal story, especially when you keep repeating yourself and you're all over the map. So get that story down. I say to the advocates that I work with, try to put your story on one page, front and back, and no more. And when I'm either going in as sort of the professional making the ask or as the parent. We kind of try to team up. Sometimes I do both because I only have me. But when the parent is speaking, I think one of the most important things is to grab them in your first sentence. And that can be, our lives have been forever changed by having a child with FASD, because their ears perk up and they want to hear more about that. And remember that you will always do a leave behind, which we've been working on in our little group, that will give them information that your written story will be in. And in your talking with them, it's okay to be emotional. You can choke up, you can get a little teary. Don't go into a full blowout wailing. That won't go over well. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was in Tallahassee, this is probably 10 years ago, and I have allergies. And when I'm in Tallahassee, they're 1,000 times worse. And I don't know if it's because I'm allergic to Tallahassee or the legislators or the process, or the environment in Tallahassee. But we had an 8:30 meeting with the chair of the Appropriations Committee in the House. That's a big deal, right? Chair of Appropriations. And my buddy was with me, and And we went up into the meeting, sat down in the office, and literally tears are streaming down my face. And after about 5 minutes of me talking about what it's like to raise a child with FASD, he stopped and he gave me a box of Kleenex and he said, "Oh my God, Catherine, I'm so sorry. This is so hard to talk about." And I'm thinking, what? And I went, "Oh my God, he thinks I'm crying." And so then I said, "I'm going with this." And I took the Kleenex and said, "Oh, you have no idea. It's really hard for me to do this." And so seize the moment. Don't let an opportunity go by. But I had him for the rest of, it was supposed to be a 15-minute meeting. It ended up being 40. So, learn and it's okay. Just go with the flow. So, and make sure that you do include the negative impact on you, on your family. I talked about the negative impact of income loss on our family because there were times my husband had to quit his job just to be home with Seth. And so there's loss of income. We had family members who wouldn't come over because of Seth's behavior and sort of the old people of saying, well, he's just spoiled and you're not strict enough on him. And, you go through all of those things. So, and that's kind of foreign to the legislators and to a number of other people. So that's okay. But always leave them with a message of hope that we do know that if we can reach them early, we have the correct diagnosis, which is so important and often just not done. And then the right interventions, they really can be contributing members of society. So always leave with hope. No legislator wants to support and give funding to a hopeless cause. And that, that makes perfect sense. So always share a hopeful moment or when you saw them reach a milestone or have success or whatever that brief moment that you can share, that's really important. And next slide, Tom. So then the second part of that is you use your heart, you lead with your heart, but you also really have to plan. And that's the skill set, I think, of the expert part. And it takes a long time to gain all that kind of information. I've been in this world for 31 years. And as I said, when my husband and I first entered this, there really was no information on FASD. I think we created the second website there was, and 1989 was the book, the year that Michael Doris wrote The Broken Cord. I'm sure many of you remember that. And that was such a hopeless story. And God, even more hopeless as time went on. But we thought, what are we in for? And thank God Almighty, we had Dr. Ann Stryskuth, who became our guru and really helped us through a lot of struggling times. And, we were like sponges, just soaking up all the information that we possibly could. So know what you want to do with your information, whether it's just for you to know that and to be able to relay it when you're meeting with legislators. But because I was a social worker and a pediatric social worker, and I've been in this field, it's my profession, I really wanted to create an FASD diagnostic clinic. So I did that at the agency in Albany. And then when we moved down here in 2000, I told the CEO I wanted to do the same thing at the Florida Center for Early Childhood. So everybody was gung-ho about that. And we determined I did not use a specific protocol in New York for diagnostic assessments. And in hindsight, I think that was probably a mistake. And it's really important to have best practice in what you are doing so that it has credibility. And so I started looking at all of the diagnostic protocols, and the one that really stuck out for me and for our team was the 4-digit diagnostic code developed by the Washington State FASD Diagnostic and Prevention Network in 1997. So that is the one that we agreed to adopt and to use at the clinic. Okay, Tom. You can move. Thank you. So we developed our interdisciplinary team. And what was so great about being at the Florida Center is that we're a multi-service agency focused on early childhood. So we already had speech and language therapy services. We had occupational therapy services. We had licensed mental health therapists. So it was really easy for us to pull together our interdisciplinary team. And you really need that when you're diagnosing a child with FASD because their strengths and deficits are across all of those areas. And it's as critically important to know their strengths as it is their deficits, because you build on their strengths to help them correct their deficits. We have contracted out with a neuropsychologist, and it's critical that it's a neuropsychologist and not just a psychologist, because the neuropsychologist can really find out where those brain deficits are and brain strengths, so that you can really develop a comprehensive treatment plan. And then we had a consulting developmental pediatrician and a neurologist for any medical consults, because FAS, full FAS, is a medical diagnosis, but sometimes also just to rule out other syndromes or other complicating factors. As you know, these kiddos can have a multitude of medical issues as well as the developmental issues. So then we scheduled a 4-day training with Dr. Astley. She was delighted to be able to come from Washington down to Florida for 4 days to train us on the diagnostic code protocol, and then the operations of how the Washington FASD clinics operate. And that was really extremely informative. She's been a great mentor and partner in what we're doing at our clinic here in Florida. Okay, Tom. And then we had to establish, we are accredited by the Council on Accreditation, which has a lot of rules and regulations around it. So we developed program policies and protocols, and then we said, how are we going to start this? How many assessments do we want to do in a year? What can we realistically do in terms of capacity? Calculated the funding to be at about $300,000 annually to start small. That would be about 65 diagnostic assessments annually, with an intervention component and also a prevention component. We determined what data to collect, because it's really important. You can't do this without data collection. You've got to be able to show them that what you're doing is working, or that you're collecting even data on how many kids are actually coming in that were prenatally exposed to alcohol, and how are they faring. And the 4-digit diagnostic code could give us that information. And then we went looking for funding opportunities and local and state champions. The recommendation to me from so many people was to go for a state opportunity. So back in 2005, our agency had great supporters, both Republican and Democrat, but as you know, Florida has been and still is primarily a Republican state, and you need those Republican champions. And so we found one on the Senate side and one on the House side that were absolutely 100% on board with this. Wanted to sponsor the bill. I wrote the community budget issue request for them. They filed it as a bill, and it made it all the way through the first year, all the way through for $280,000 as non-recurring funding. But I had to really learn in my head that FASD is a bipartisan issue. It affects Republicans and Democrats and independents and non-party people. And you have to consider all potential champions, regardless of whether you agree with their political viewpoints or not, or regardless of party. Everyone has the potential to be a champion on this issue, and we need all of our champions at the table, and that's critically important. Okay, Tom. And then just to conclude, here's the formula. When you use your heart plus your head, you get a really passionate and knowledgeable advocate. And when meeting with your legislators, remember, generally you have about 15 minutes. I was in a meeting once, though, where I was taking someone new with me for the first time, and it was going really well. And the legislator was asking a lot of questions. And then my partner said, "Oh, sorry, our 15 minutes is up," and got up from the chair. And I'm like, no. So you don't control the 15 minutes, they control the time. And if they're going and asking questions, which is what you want them to do, then just go with it. I never give them more information than what it is they're asking for, because it's really pretty easy to get overwhelmed by this whole topic. So answer it. If you don't know it, there have been times when I've said, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I promise you I will get it for you. and then you must follow through and do that. Talk about why it's an issue in your area. Keep your ask brief. What are you asking for? Put that up front, and then why it's important. And if you can talk about any cost savings down the road, they love to hear return on investment. Please provide that information. We are our affiliate group now in Florida, which is brand new. We are working on developing our Florida fact sheet, which we had 15 years ago, but it's so outdated. We need to create a new one. But leave them, even in your leave behind packet, leave them with enough information to be informed and interested, but not overwhelming. I've been with folks who leave packets like this thick behind. They're never going to get, maybe their aides will go through it, but they won't. And always thank them for their time. That's really important. Give them, I always do a handwritten note after I meet with them, thanking them and their staff. It's all about building those relationships over time. You build relationships with the staff because the legislators will term off at some point, but the staff generally stay. And so they'll know the issue from session to session to session. So, you know, build relationships with them, ask them how you can help them in any of the bill writing or whatever. And always get them back the information that you said that you would send to them. That builds a great deal of credibility, and they trust you. And then they will start coming to you and asking you for help or information on something. And that's when you know you've got a really solid relationship. So and don't forget to have fun, because even though it can be a little bit intimidating, it really is fun. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I hope that's helpful to you. I am absolutely here and available to answer questions or to help you at any time. Just don't hesitate to reach out. That's it.
Well, Catherine, that amazing accomplishments and such important inspiration for what we all need to be doing, and we'll need to get started with as this bill is reintroduced. I know we have there's a lot of chatter going on, which is terrific, and some questions I think embedded in there, and we'll open it up in a moment or so. I just wanted to mention a couple of things before we do, and bring this down to what's happening next. And as everyone has mentioned, we anticipate the bill's introduction, and as we lead into that, we want to start to forge our relationships, renew those relationships, and prepare our stories for communication with elected officials, and probably most often it will be their staff members. And just to put a point on some of the key people, we've mentioned this before. As you look here, and as Susan mentioned, NOFAS is already having individual meetings with key people. The first name you see there, Patty Murray, being perhaps the most important person on Capitol Hill for us to have success. But everyone here is part of the committee of jurisdiction that will be looking at this bill. And as was also mentioned, North Carolina advocates, they talked with Senator Burr's staff already. And so our goal is to talk with the staff members for everyone you see here and try to engage them all. So if you're not part of an advocacy state group that has scheduled time to talk with the policy team, the NOFAS policy team, please do contact any of us, Susan, Catherine, Kate, myself, Mike, and let us know that you're willing to reach out, or hopefully you even have a relationship already, and we will work with you to make sure you have everything you need for that approach. The same can be said on the House side. This is, you see a little bit of a longer list, and the number next to the state there is the district in that state, but Anna Eshoo being perhaps most important, but everyone on this list is going to be integral to our success. You see almost left center, Angie Craig, who Susan mentioned. There's meetings coming up with her. So all of these folks, House and Senate, are going to be a priority. It's going to be a priority for us to connect with. And then in terms of also what is coming up, I do want to share another document here with you. And this is sort of an action alert that, or an example of one the NOFAS has issued in the past. And we will be issuing an action alert once we have a little bit more detail on the timing for the introduction of the bill. And when we want to really start reaching out. And as you can see, we will summarize the bill itself, make sure that you have access to the full bill text, the national agenda, which is some of the very most compelling facts about our issue and details of the rationale for why we've got to have this passed. We'll also then get into very explicit guidance that you can use for developing an email outreach, or to use as talking points for a conversation with House and Senate staff members. So we will alert you, and everyone on the list will receive these documents, and they'll also be available on the NOFAS website. And as I mentioned that, I just want to see if I have this up here. Just quickly show you that if you go to Policy and Training Center on the navigation bar, or you can also look for the Policy and Training Center logo, the watercolor of the U.S. Capitol with us as advocates. You can go in there and find information about these policy forums, as I said, every final Wednesday of the month. And we will then have the PowerPoint presentations and the video, so you can pass this on and share it with others, or rewatch, particularly, Catherine's segment, which we might just clip into an added piece to the action alert, because it's so informative as to how to handle this contact. And then if you scroll down 117th Congress, what we'll be doing is including all the information that we've referenced as these documents are developed. They'll all be available on this in this location here. And we mentioned, for instance, the national agenda, or leave behind, which is something that you can, we want you to pass on to staff. And you'll do that in conjunction with a state-specific fact sheet that NOFAS will work with you to develop. So they have the national agenda, a bill summary, and state information, as well as your powerful story about the issue. So that's some of what's coming up. I want to turn it over to my colleagues for other comments. Then we're going to open it up to your comments and questions. And then, as a reminder, we'll conclude at the top of the hour. That's 3 o'clock Eastern, but are always available, particularly if you have a relationship or are in a state or district with one of the folks that we showed earlier on these key committees. Definitely want to engage with you and strategize with you.
Todd, I didn't see that you were on the NOFAS website. Could you show the leave behind? Because I think that's kind of it's a great document. Thanks to Mike for starting that. And what it is, it gives information on the issue and it's succinct, and it's graphically pleasing. And so that can go ahead to the staff, so you don't have to. There it is. And so it gives that information, so you don't need to provide that information. And like Tom said, if we developing your state specific, but it gets on the second page, it gets into costs, which I know that's one area that has been a difficult thing. And if you go on the CDC website, it has the cost at $4 billion a year to the US, but that's just for FAS. And that seems like the data that's, okay. So let's just look at that. So you see it's costly. If you look at it, we recalculated it based on a new study that was done it was Larry Bird and other authors that looked at a whole range of studies on the cost, economic cost, and then took that and I worked with Dr. Sally Anderson on this and looked at what the cost would be well, this would be $217, I believe, but for the new prevalence of FAS and including FASD. So it goes from 5 billion to 205 billion per year on a national basis. So that can be recalculated for your states. And then it also includes 30,000, it includes corrections costs, which they talked about in the study. And although if you go to the end of the last page of the document, has all the references. So we spent a lot of time working on that, and it talks about the various studies that we know on, and it talks about the funding. And then this page has to deal with, there was a, Tom and I were part of the panel. It was a technical expert panel in September of 2019 through HHS, and they identified gaps. And so that's the most recent federal document that we have. So we took information from that and put in where what parts of the bill deals with those gaps. So that's a document that you guys, it's on the website in the policy and legislative section. So I think that's it for me, unless anybody has any.
I wanted to add, I was looking at, I'm having a great conversation with Mike Jeffrey, who happens to be from what was formerly called Barrow. I've been to Barrow, Mike. I've been to Barrow in February, in the first week in February. And I've also been to Barrow when the icebergs that were just off the shore were little tiny things. So, and I love Barrow. I've also been to Barrow when the bears were out and the alerts were like, don't be out there, kind of a thing. So it's really cool. Anyway, the thing that we have to be careful, that you have to be careful as advocates, because it's very easy, especially in this day and time, is put your political affiliations aside. If you're a strong political advocate, put it aside, and if you have to, because in the business that we're in as advocacy, you're going to need both, contrary to popular belief, you're going to need both sides of the aisle to come on there. Yeah. And you'll also be surprised, as I revealed to Mike in our little discussion, you'll also be surprised as to the commitment and what the source of their, just like we have stories, those members and those staffers have stories too. There's a reason why they're in the health world. It's more than something that they're doing and everything else. It's very important to understand that. And the truth is, the more you learn about that, the better you become as an advocate, because you'll find out things, you'll go, wow, like I just told Mike Jeffrey that Mr. Young has I think it's a grandson. One of his daughter, I know her as sister Dawn. His daughter Dawn has, I think, she adopted a lot of kids because she couldn't have any of herself. So she adopted a lot of Native kids. Several of them are substance abuse impacted. I know one is FASD impacted. So, with respect to Mr. Young, FASD is a very personal thing. It's a very personal commitment, as well as the state is about 20%, between 18 and 20% Alaska Native in its category. And there is an impact in the villages with respect to the use of alcohol and the prevalence of alcohol and other drugs, as a matter of fact. So those things are very impactful. And the more we can learn about folks about that and their past, the more it allows you to kind of relate to them. It's kind of like when you meet somebody for the first time, you try to find those common things to talk about. And once you find that common thing, it becomes the basis sometimes for a relationship that just keeps going on and on and on. So it's for those of you who may be nervous, it's fun. You have a story. Your story is extremely valuable. It needs to be heard. It's going to make a difference. Don't ever let anybody tell you it's not going to make a difference, because your story is important. Get out there and tell it. You're part of it. For us to go in and see, I know Senator Burr because I've traveled with him. My wife and I have traveled with him when I was in the Air Force. Whoop-de-doo. I'm not a North Carolina constituent. I don't vote. My vote doesn't matter. Is that in fact? So the truth is, being able to walk in there with a North Carolina constituent carries a lot of strength, a lot of strength. So use your constituency to your advantage, wherever, whatever that state is, whatever that district is. That's all my little go get 'em speech.
Thank you, Mike. We have a few minutes. I'd love to hear if anyone has any comment or a question, anything they'd like to share. That would be very helpful. Barbara Wybrecht, I think I saw you put your hand up, and you're a perfect person to start us out. Barbara, you are muted. Please unmute.
Catherine and I knew each other years ago, and she thought there wasn't much there for her, but when we started in 1973, there really wasn't much there for parents. But I just wanted to share that it's really, as you all know, a lifetime journey. And Rob and Aaron both have full FAS, and they were married 3 years ago. And they live between my house and her mother's house. And they're both very creative. She does a lot of bead work and sells it on Etsy, actually. And he's had different jobs. And as we do throughout their whole life, there had to be accommodations. And it took us 2 years to work through all the social services hangups so that they could be married and not lose their benefits. So anyway, that's part of my story.
Thank you, Barbara. And anyone else, please jump in, particularly if you have a question you'd like, for instance, have a member of the NOFAS team, have a conversation with you to sort of walk you through, how to be an advocate. You've heard from people like Catherine and Susan, they're none better. Barbara, I'm sure, would be willing to do that. But even if you just have a general comment, please speak up.
This is Amy Hendricks in North Carolina with Proof Alliance NC. And I was just curious, in working with the advocates and the ones that we have actually identified in North Carolina, Valerie specifically right now, will you guys be able to offer any insight to them on how to have a discussion about leveraging the dollars and what that might be if we're looking at our individual states? Because I know when we sit down and we start talking about numbers, it's important to know how we're going to leverage what money we may bring into our state through partnerships and so forth. So will that be included in the advocacy piece?
That might be a subsequent component of it. I think it's very important that and maybe you could look at it as sort of incremental here, where we want to get this bill introduced. We want to get it on the radar. We want to get it passed. We want to address questions that staff and members have. And part of that is what states have an infrastructure in place to where they are a viable state to deliver some of the services and programs that are described in provisions of the bill. And we've been talking about that, and that certainly came up, that concept with North Carolina folks and in Washington State. Obviously, Alaska, Minnesota, there are many states that have what you might call an infrastructure where they would be a strong candidate should CDC, should HRSA have additional dollars for this issue. So yes, we ought to talk about those assets in the states, and then take it the next step of thinking about costs, partnerships, public-private joint initiatives. And remember that's when you look at the bill, you'll see that point is emphasized, where as monies go to the state, we want to ensure that it doesn't just go to state agencies, but that they partner with entities like the NOFAS and the Proof Alliance affiliates, and it's that public-private partnership. Just a couple
Tom,
minutes.
this is
So, yes, Janet.
Great,
please.
thanks.
yeah, quick thought. I think Amy's point is really interesting. What we might want to do and could do is put together some information about how in the past, when these funds were there, how it leveraged money in the past. Because we do have that data, some data on that in Texas, and I'm sure some of the other folks who had some federal funding might have that data as well. The other thing we could do is talk about in our own individual states when other funding has come through, generally how it gets leveraged. I think it is a worthwhile thing. It could be a selling point actually, because I'm sure when people got these funds, it did indeed leverage lots of other, not only money, but work. And I could probably capture that somehow, and I bet other people could. Just a thought.
Indeed, and it is a whole new endeavor should we be successful and should this legislation be authorized. And then, as Kate described, the difference between the authorization and then the appropriation of funds, whole new challenge then to engage with the agencies to ensure that they follow the authorization provisions, and that the states, all of us, can build a relationship so those agencies see us as viable grantees and contractors to deliver those services. So there's not a single person that we should not be trying to engage with as an ally. And there's any information, anything at all in your state about what has been done related to FASD in the past, the capacity that you have to address the issue, and think of it in the context of what does exist. So how you can plug into existing scientists, and researchers and any other project that is going on, but also independently, something that is evidence-based, yet is sitting, figuratively in an inbox because there are no resources. So
will there be some kind of a sample letter or something like that that we can use? I'm then from Pennsylvania, that we can use to get out, that people who don't feel like they know how to write a letter that's acceptable to a congressman, that we can give them something that you have that they could sign and send in, a resource like that?
Yes, indeed. We'll have the action alert, which will have explicit details on crafting correspondence. It'll also have a sample message if you'd rather just follow that route and plug in your information. But I want to thank everyone. And again, reminder that on the NOFAS website, you'll be able to get a video of this presentation. You'll be able to get the slides, all the information that we've mentioned, some documents that are just in a draft form right now, but will be finalized soon and posted. You'll be able to get that information as well. So follow the NOFAS Weekly Roundup on Mondays for additional details and emails specifically to the advocates. I want to tell you, there are 144 people on the advocate list, and that list is growing. We want to keep adding people so that all can track along with this and play our part. So thank you, everyone. And thanks to the NOFAS policy team, and we'll see everyone next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Interesting.